You're very welcome to this week's episode of CentreGround. And tonight I'm putting the spotlight on a new roadmap to reset the country onto a path of healing and prosperity for all. But first, as usual, can I invite you please to go to the Irish Inquiry website, and there's a drop-down box there where you can enter in details of how you can help us technically. So if you have any technical skills, we'd really appreciate if you can offer those to us voluntarily. Alternatively, if you would like to donate a few pounds towards the housekeeping, as it were, there are costs involved in running the platform. We don't receive any advertising or any sponsorship, so any small donation will be most welcome. And so to tonight's programme, as I said, the spotlight is on a new plan, a new roadmap to put the country on the road to healing and prosperity for all. And just by way of introduction, it's coming close to a year since lockdown was announced. And you don't need me to tell you that we have been, as a nation, and indeed as a world, plunged into the unknown. And I suppose many of us are feeling maybe going through the various stages of bereavement, the loss of our old way of life. And in any bereavement, there are predictable stages. The first stage is denial that it's actually happening. And indeed, there are many, many people that are still, in a state of denial that there's actually a pandemic, denial that COVID-19 actually exists. And the next stage then is one of anger. And fortunately, we haven't seen that happen in Ireland, but across Europe and places like Holland, we've seen people taking to the streets, and we've seen some ugly scenes. Then there is the stage of bargaining, and I suppose that is really what the government has been doing. They've been bargaining with us for the last year. If you do this, if we lock down for 2 weeks, it'll flatten the curve. If we do this, this will happen. And so constantly bargaining with us. I suppose this is the third lockdown, and I spoke to a self-employed business person today who said that they managed to get through the first 2 lockdowns, but they're just finding this one is really breaking them mentally, financially, in every way possible. The savings have run out, and all the bills are coming in for rent on a number of premises, a mortgage, loan repayments, and with no prospect or no hope of an end in sight. They're just at this stage where they just can no longer continue. And I suppose they're entering into a deep state of depression. And then the final stage is acceptance, accepting what is actually happening, accepting the reality of what is actually happening, and then coming up with creative ways of dealing with it. And, I don't subscribe to the view that going out onto the streets and screaming and roaring and shouting and a change of government is going to solve anything or going to change anything. That's just my own personal view. I believe that we are going to have to start living the change that we want to see happening in our country. And for that reason, it gives me great pleasure tonight to introduce to you 2 people that I have come to know in recent weeks. Enda Donlan is an osteopath, and he is the founder of Sovereignty Ireland, and he is our guest tonight, along with singer-songwriter Michelle Shannon. And I'm going to be chatting to them now for the next half hour or more about their vision of the kind of Ireland that we can have going forward. And as always, in the second half of the programme, Dr. Peter Dunn will introduce the hot topic of the week. And so to begin, Enda, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to CentreGround. I think, Enda, that your microphone may be muted.
Okay, am I here?
Yes.
Yes,
yeah.
Great to be on,
now,
Anna. Thank you very much for inviting me.
You're very, very welcome. Enda, can you tell people who are watching in a little bit about yourself, your background, and so on?
Well, to give you a whistle-stop journey through my life and where I'm coming from, without boring you too much, I suppose from a teenager, I ran for Ireland a couple of times. So yeah, I suppose I had a bit of mojo back then, and I had a deep interest in health. So I didn't have a science subject in school, so I was told I couldn't learn about the body. So I found that kind of disconcerting, and I didn't buy into it. And I went about continuing my passion to figure out what health is. And so I found a course in health and physiology that I could get into, even though I didn't have a science subject. So that started me off on a deep inquiry into what health is for each other, for myself, and what health is even just for community. I went and studied natural medicine in England. That brought me into training briefly as a hypnotherapist, and then as an osteopath for 5 years. I'm deeply interested in spirituality, but I'm not religious. And so working as an osteopath, I suppose I got a little, I felt working one-on-one, I wanted to reach out to more people and be of benefit and of service to a wider community. So I started creating spiritual events, consciousness events that brought people together, mysticism really. And as you know from people like Dara Malloy, who you had on last week, you know, that deep inquiry that doesn't belong to any dogma or any belief system, but is a deep understanding of what consciousness is to ours. It's a personal experience. So I've been running events like Conscious Concert, Winter Solstice, Summer Solstice, and then in 2020, except for the pandemic happened, we would have been putting in a consciousness village in the Electric Picnic in the place where the Body and Soul area was. So that would have been a big platform for consciousness in Ireland. It was going to be very exciting. And I suppose as a hobby, I dress up as a bee and jump around and make electronic music with global messages for consciousness and environmentalism. So that's kind of a whistle-stop journey through where I'm coming from.
And Enda, I suppose throughout the lockdown then, like many people, you began to look around and observe what was actually happening in the country. And from talking to you, I have learned that that became a catalyst for coming up with a vision for the direction that the country could head in. And I suppose that led to the setting up of Sovereignty Ireland. So you might tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, sure. It's like, you know, this was, I'm not politically minded, really. I'm a visionary, I suppose, and I like to always focus on what the solutions are, and I do believe every individual has amazing power. Every individual watching this has amazing power, and we don't understand how much power we have, really. And what I was seeing when the pandemic hit was a lot of helplessness, a lack of solutions. And I just felt, well, you know, and I talked to a few people who were involved in movements in the past, and I asked them, did they know of anything that was happening? And they said, what we have politically wise and in, you know, the political arena is all, you know, is what there is right now. There is nothing coming true, really. So I thought this was concerning. And I just felt, well, I'm going to speak to different people and create a manifesto and create a movement. And my background in health, I always refer back to what is the healthy model for people. What would a healthy country look like? Starting with a nation, what would that actually look like, where everybody everybody is supported, and there's unity within diversity within that nation.
So tell me a little bit about how you think a healthy nation would look.
Well, a lot of this, as we know, you've got a long background in school teaching, so it starts with education, and as we all know in this country, we're taught, we're in a system where it's just about regurgitation of information. We're not taught to critically think. And that obviously has major ramifications for how we interact with knowledge and information. It has major implications for our, how we choose our path in life. Generally the economy and what the economy needs generally dictates what we'll choose as a path, in our work life. So starting with education, it's about, bringing people back to a healthy understanding and a connection to themselves, how they can be and what their passions are. So when we have people connected to their passions and are following their joy, then it also interlinks with health. So what would a healthy country look like? Well, we see we're very reliant on pharmaceuticals. Being an osteopath for 18 years now, I see, all the people that I see on, say, Prozac and so on, and various antidepressants that, we had St. John's wort that was used for many, many hundreds of years. The doctors aren't prescribing these natural treatments yet. They're very beneficial and they're non-toxic. So, we have a system in health that doesn't reward health. It actually rewards disease. So from a health perspective, we really need a common sense approach of doctors keeping their community healthy rather than profiting off disease. So that's a kind of an idea where the health model is coming from an economic perspective. 80% of people or homesteads in Ireland earn under 80,000 a year. So, and a lot of that money is taken off households, through various, unfair systems, be it, really high mortgages. If we look back to, when, maybe the 60s or 70s, the mortgage in proportion to what we earned, was in a healthier balance. Now just people are on this wheel where, and the repercussions of being on this, I suppose, hamster wheel, for want of a better word, is, we don't have time, and time is really precious, and it's part of health. And when we don't have time, we put our children into creches, we put our elderly into homes, and we're just, by the time we get home, we're just about to vegetate, basically. And back to even working, my own practice, I see when because I'm in a commuter village in Slane, when I suggest even 20 minutes to stretch for health, people look at me as if I have two heads. So people don't have time. They're really up against the wall, and these structures, they have to give. If we're going to move forward and really prioritize for health. And there's a lot of stuff on the manifesto, and I'm just giving you a little insight into some things. But but I'll say that from a political perspective, that's really important right now, I think, is that politicians earn too much. Politicians, in our manifesto, we believe and feel that politicians need to earn the same amount as teachers and the same amount as nurses. Like, if we don't reinstate, if public service, if it's not a priority to serve, then, politicians we've just let them, we've given them too much slack. It's totally corrupt. They're compensated in so many ways and funded through very many, corrupt systems. So that needs to be, the reins need to be pulled in on that, and we need to go back to true service.
Okay, so your manifesto then is like any manifesto. It covers a wide range of issues, from health to education to transport, the economy, farming, all of that. And basically, I suppose the whole thing is built on health. And, you know, if we have children that are allowed to follow their passion and do the work that they would love to do, instead of, you know, entering into a course that will take them to a job that the economy is seeking, something that they're not passionate about, it will lead to poor health. You've spoken there then about the hamster wheel that people are finding themselves on, and that even owning a home is becoming increasingly difficult for more and more people. So I suppose if you were to describe the kind of Ireland that we'd have if we were living out the manifesto that you and others have come up with, describe it to me.
Well, the Ireland, how it would look and feel is that people would have choice and they'd have freedom. They'd be able to look after each other. You know, this is the basis. You know, communities would be able to strive. We just don't look after each other, and this is a real concern. This is, you know, and the priority. We need to get to a stage where we're given this little carrot, I think, from school, and we're taught in a competitive model of education, and you know, this template for success is basically based, you know, in materialism, the attainment of, you know, a lot of material wealth. So this, you know, and as we know when we read the biographies of rich people and so on, like, you know, it's not, you know, it's not the benchmark for happiness. You know, it's not, you know, what gives us happiness. And we do see in a lot of what we might consider poverty countries, but they have food, they're very happy. You know, so why is that? You know, if they don't have, you know, if they have their food and they have their shelter, and if they have connection is so important for a healthy community. And we are becoming more and more disconnected, and it's very concerning. And depression and suicides, as we know, is on the rise, not just because of the pandemic, but prior to the pandemic. This is a major concern, and there's so much unreporting happening, you know, of the people who are taking their own lives.
So I suppose what you're speaking about there is already happening at grassroots level. And before we went live tonight, I was actually watching the recording of the Féile Brigid event that took place last Saturday, the Afri Féile Brigid event, and it was hosted by Rory Kiernan. Hitching for Hope is the book that he wrote, and there was a beautiful interview with a couple up in Monaghan who have set up a community farm. And for any viewers that would like to go and investigate, it's Síolta Cree, Siolta Croi, which is the Irish for, I think, Seeds of the Heart. And just, you know, a young couple, they seem a very, very young couple who have moved to County Monaghan, and they have set up a community farm where people can come and live on the farm, and they're producing all their own food, and they're farming regeneratively. And so that's just one example. I really think myself that there's just so much happening out there already. It's really a matter of joining up the dots. I know that Peter is the founder of Regenerative Farming Ireland, and they have almost 3,000 members, and they're doing the same thing. So, and I get a sense that what you're talking about is already happening. Do you sense that yourself?
I do see a lot of activity, I suppose, from doing events, conscious events a lot more people are waking up. There's a lot more conversations I'm having with people on the streets that are, I kind of go, wow, people are really waking up. And there is, obviously there's always change and we're evolving. But I do feel a sense that, and there's probably sounds a bit woo-woo, that there is a consciousness awakening happening. And there's a lot more people asking questions, and there's a lot more people growing in their communities. And, there is a striving, I think, right now for solutions. And I think out of that apathy that we feel, and I think we are coming from, society is a lot, there's a lot of addictions in our society. So I think when we hit, when we go to the bottom and we really kind of feel that we need to change, I think a lot of change comes out of hitting rock bottom. And maybe we're hitting rock bottom where a lot of change is going to, not just the change that I see, through the events and odd people on the street, but there's going to be a real flood of movement towards a positive world and a positive nation. Yeah.
And, as Gandhi says, we have to be the change that we want to see in others. And, I think people sort of labour under the misapprehension that if you topple the government and bring in a new government, that everything is going to change. But that, in fact, is not the case. And I think Buckminster Fuller said that there's no point in putting our energy into attacking the old. What we have to do is to build the new so that the old becomes obsolete. And as you mentioned there, we had Darren Malloy on last week speaking about Celtic spirituality. And I think there is a huge drive at the moment to go back to our roots, to go back to the earth, to reconnect with the earth, to start living simply again in a more holistic, and a more real way. And I suppose the other thing is this, that Dr. Erica Chenoweth, she is a professor in Harvard University, and indeed she has been named as one of the top 100 thinkers in the world. She did research on revolutions throughout the 20th century. And what she found was that violent revolutions don't bring about lasting change. It's a matter of just toppling the old, and the new is just a carbon copy of what has gone before. It doesn't bring about real change. But she observed that when there was sustained, peaceful agitation by 3.5% of the population, it actually brought about real lasting change that resulted in justice. And I suppose one of the examples that she gives is the fall of Slobodan Milosevic in Serbia in the 1990s. And, when he gave orders to the army to go out and fire on the people that were demonstrating on the street, and it was a peaceful demonstration, the army ignored his orders. So, and I sort of figured out that we need, based on our population size, we need about 172,000 people in Ireland that are working consciously to bring about a better future. And I think perhaps, we're nearing that number if we add up all the people that are operating at grassroots level. They're already living it out. They're no longer hamsters on the wheel. They're actually creating a better life for them and for their families. Now, I know that I have rambled on a little bit there, maybe too long, but you have a conference coming up on the 20th of February, and I know that you've asked me to say a few words about it. Tell us about it, Enda.
Well, we've been running convergence gatherings. We've two roadmaps, I suppose. We've ways forward to how we can bring about change in this country. And one of them is convergence gatherings, they're events that bring together open-minded people who have solutions. And then the other way is the hubs that we're setting up for members, and people can come in, and the membership is open to everybody for people to sign up and be part of the solutions that are going to be coming forward from sovereignty. So we have no leaders on the website and are in the movement. So this is about people coming together equanimously and contributing to the solution. So they're the main two ways forward. It's our public event, the Convergence Gatherings, which Michelle is going to talk about later on, about when it's happening and who's on the next one. And then the membership forums, where everybody will get a chance to be part of this amazing change.
And how can people find out more about this, Enda?
Well, if you sign up as a member on sovereignty.ie website, you'll be accepted as a member and you'll be part of the conversation. Again, the manifesto is a dream seed. It's a work in progress. We invite experts on all levels of society to come together and create and co-create this dream and bring it into reality. And it is as I ran the manifesto initially, when I was writing it up, and with the help of consulting people and so on. When I showed it to my dad, who'd be like a broadsheet kind of leaning right of things, he's ex-civil service, retired. And, he read it, and I said, well, what do you think? And he says, well, it does make sense. It's all common sense. And that's this is not, there's no labels really that can be put on sovereignty. This is common sense. And anybody who reads it will, it's stuff that we've been seeing. A lot of people who've been, I suppose, thinking, I think everybody watching this has looked at what's been going on in this country for years. And I think everybody has been thinking of solutions, be it, and asking questions, like simple ones, like why are we still fluoridating our water? Why are we throwing so much poisons on our food and eating it? Why are we doing this to ourselves? This is like common sense. And there's nothing in the website that we feel is not appealing to the common sense of a healthy person.
Right. And is the conference open to everybody to sign up for?
Well, the conference is a live event that is streamed. You sign up and you can see it on Zoom, but it's also streamed live on our social media platforms. So Facebook, and I think there's other ones it's streamed on as well.
Okay, well, and I just want to thank you so much for that. And as I say, I've only come to hear about Sovereignty Ireland, I think, in the last 3 weeks. I have to say that I'm very, very impressed by what you have been doing, and very impressed with your manifesto. And I just love the idea that it is open to all people that are on the same wavelength as yourselves to become part of this movement, which I think can be a very, very powerful movement for change. So thank you so much for that, Enda. Now, before I go to Michelle, if you're listening, Stephen, my screen is frozen and I can't actually see anything. So, Stephen, if you're listening, if you kind of change the screen for me so that I can see myself and my guest, it would make it. Okay, thank you, Stephen, for that. We'll just pause for a moment. Now, yes, that's a little bit better. I don't see Michelle. Now that's yes, that's a lot better for me. Thank you, Stephen. And as always, I wish to, yes, that's absolutely perfect. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Stephen. And I suppose at this juncture, I would like to pay tribute to the huge work that Stephen is doing on the Irish Inquiry and making this platform available to us. I suppose one of the benefits of lockdown is that so many people have moved online, and it just means that like tonight I'm in Longford and Enda is in Slane, Peter is in County Louth, and Michelle is in County Leitrim. So it's amazing how you know, we can put together a program like this from the comfort of our kitchen table, as the fella says. So now it gives me great pleasure to welcome Michelle Shannon to CentreGround. You're very welcome, Michelle. Now I think Michelle has to unmute her.
Yes.
Yes,
you, Anna.
it's unmuted now. It's unmuted. You're very, very welcome, Michelle.
Thank you so much for the invitation. It's lovely to be here and yeah, to be sharing and witnessing. Thank you.
Not at all. And as I said in the introduction, you're a singer-songwriter, so maybe you might tell our listeners a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. So as you said, I'm in Leitrim, and yeah, I write songs, or songs come through me more so than me writing them maybe. And I moved here to do the traditional Irish course, which has been running for some time now in Drumshambo. And what else? I studied media and anthropology in the University of Maynooth, and so community radio is one of our mutual passions, Anna, which we figured out the other day. And yeah, I'm a member of Friends of the Earth and a facilitator with them. I did the training last year. There hasn't been much in the way of trainings happening, of course, with where we find ourselves, but yeah, and I also recently qualified in quantum coherence therapy, which is a modality merging Chinese medicine and quantum physics. So that's pretty much it. And of course, I'm a member of Sovereignty Ireland team as well, and that's, I guess, mainly why I'm here today with you as your guest.
Yeah, so a very, very broad and wide background there. And as you say, you're here tonight to talk to us about Sovereignty Ireland. Why did you get involved with Sovereignty Ireland?
Yeah, so, well, I know Enda from before, so in transparency to share that, I've worked with him and Maria on the events, with the conscious events, and I met them through going to one of their events, and so that's how I ended up joining the team. So I suppose I was one of the first to hear about the vision that Enda has, and has now brought more into being together with the team. But yeah, like, I feel like I'm part of this movement mainly because I resonate so much with the vision of co-creating a new way of being. And today I was just reflecting on the phrase of Tir gan changa, Tir gan anum, you know, what I was thinking about that being, like, I think it was Padraig Pearse who said that, but, you know, also like Tir gan ashling, a country without a vision, I feel is also, you know, missing some of the soul and the richness that is present here in such abundance. So yeah, with that being said, I just see so much possibility in tuning into what is possible when we gather together and we pool together all our gifts and knowledge and expertise and experiences, and share them, you know, and really just explore what can we do with where we are now and what we've come to know and learn through our experiences. So that's a big part. And then the values, you know, that sovereignty is very connected with: integrity, inclusivity, reciprocity, accountability, and transparency are values that I do my best to live my life with. And I feel like I've witnessed so much change in my life since I really consciously started to integrate those into my way of being. And yeah, I feel like I've also witnessed that in community and in friends and with organizations like Friends of the Earth, who I mentioned already, and Stand, who I was part of when I was studying in Maynooth, and the likes of Her Story, you know, and they're all integrating these values, at least from my perspective. And they really show what's possible when people are encouraged, empowered, and feel there's a space to express themselves openly and to be heard, to be seen, and to be felt. And yeah, I feel like the Sovereignty Dream Seed Manifesto, which is on the website, which you can have a look at, you know, it invites that participation, the inclusivity. It allows people to share their ideas and visions, and then they can be explored together in teams or in, as Enda mentioned, the little hubs that have been recently launched, I suppose. And yeah, I'm really excited to see what's going to come from all of the connections and all of the gifts. And just last week we had our first members meeting on Saturday, and there was 55 people, members there, and it was really heartwarming to hear some of about their backgrounds and like their expertise, let's say, and their vision for an Ireland that we could all be, I suppose, a little bit more at peace at living with. And yeah, so anyway, I think I've shared enough there.
No, it's extremely interesting. And I suppose what I'm seeing really is that it is the coming together of people that are on the same wavelength, and people that want to bring about a better future for our children and for our grandchildren. And I suppose, you know, and it's wonderful to see you, a young person. I'm old enough to be your mother, possibly twice over, and it gives me great joy, really great joy, to see a young person like yourself, so involved and so wanting to bring about a better future. And what I love about it is that, the whole metaphor of a journey. And I suppose the end goal is that that there will be healing and prosperity for everybody living in the country, but that it is a journey together, and it's a journey, I suppose, a journey into the unknown.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I feel like what I was reflected on today too was like about, the tree, and yeah, how this part now of like creating a foundation and putting roots down, so to speak, of what we're going to be growing and what's going to blossom. And we've just had this beautiful time of welcoming Imbolc and Brigid, and I was also tuned into that Brigid offering for AFRI on the weekend, and we just have such a rich culture and creativity on this island. And of course, some of it is at this present time very celebrated and respected and valued, but there's always room for more and for expansion within that. And I suppose, like what you've touched on there, another key seed of this movement is about restoring the health of the land and the people of the land. And instead of it being like perhaps it has been for a long time, this kind of leadership model, but it being more like focused on guardians and stewards of the land, so people feeling really part of it, and also this merging of the young people, so both the children and the teenagers and all the, I suppose, generations right up into the elders. And like Enda touched on earlier, like it can be that often the elders are now in nursing homes and people don't have time to care for them. But if you look to a lot of other traditions, especially Native American traditions, they have a very rich like lineage and a big I suppose archive almost of like wisdom that's just been held onto and kept very sacred and kept very alive in their tradition. And I feel like on this land we have so many very wise people, and often I've known in my own experience I haven't maybe asked them or I haven't seeked it out, and so I think like in this way, in this new model, this I suppose proposition and manifesto is a really beautiful opportunity to bring together the young people and the elders and to have these conversations, because the young people have so much like ideas and they have a dynamic energy, and then of course the elders have this wisdom and peacefulness, and there's a real beauty in that union and that dance between the young people and the elders. And yeah, I'd love to see more of that happening, and I feel like it is happening, but it's happening gradually, but that's okay, it's step by step.
Yes, and speaking of connecting with the wisdom of the past, we have a lovely video clip here. I came across this on your Facebook music page. It's a song that you have written, and it was recorded out in the countryside to celebrate St. Brigid's Day. It's a song that you've composed about St. Brigid. So maybe, Stephen, if you can roll it there, as it were. Absolutely beautiful. I suppose, Michelle, the one thing that has been repeated over and over again by so many different groups is that once we lost our connection with the earth, it set us on a path to self-destruction that has brought us to the sorry place where we are today, where all our various systems are breaking down, our health system, our economic system, our education system. So I suppose, what I take from sovereignty is that in order to go forward, we have to reconnect with the earth in the same way that our ancestors did, and that, I suppose, forms the foundation for going forward.
Yeah, I feel like the traditions are beautiful, and we can look to a lot of them, but it's also about I suppose creating a new way, and something that will meet people where they are now and where we all are now collectively. So we can certainly take a lot of wisdom and really rootedness from the ancestors and from their traditions, but we also I suppose in this time we probably need to come together like we can with Sovereignty Ireland or in other community grassroots organisations, and really deeply inquire into what kind of Ireland do you want to live in? What kind of way do you want to be being every day? And it might seem like when you start to tune into that miles away from where you are, but through being together and sharing and expressing that, that's all of, I suppose, how many of our ancestors did. They dreamed, they dreamed this into being where we are now. And I suppose there's a lot to be said from inquiring and exploring and allowing ourselves to be creative and to express what we feel in our hearts, rather than just allowing things to just keep unfolding just because it is this way right now. So yeah, I think there's a lot of potential and a lot of possibility in coming together and in community and in remembering, and like with the Gaeilge, like I've been on my own journey with that, and I suppose like half the country I'm reading 32 words for field at the moment, and yeah, it's amazing, like the journey with that once you open your awareness to it, all the words start coming back. I'll be out for a walk and I'll remember another word, and so that remembrance is within us. It's not outside of us in any particular party or movement even. That sovereignty is within each human being, and it's there waiting for us to remember it and to bring it into our lives in a daily way. And yeah, so.
Okay, Michelle, before I let you go, if you can just tell us a little bit about your Convergence Conference that's coming up on the 20th of February, how people can sign up for it, and who or what is actually happening and who's speaking.
Great. Yeah, and just before I do that, I just want to say that Sean Mulrooney, who was also in that video with me, who I live with, we co-wrote that song. So just to honor him and his creativity in that, and our friends, we all created it together. But yeah, so the Convergence 4 is coming up on Saturday the 20th, and yeah, we currently have 8 guests confirmed for the gathering. So I did just write a little bit down. So it'll begin at 6 o'clock until 7:15. And as Enda already mentioned, you can either join via Zoom. And to do that, you go to our website and go to events, and then there's a little link and you register that way. Or alternatively, you can join us on the Facebook Live. But, you know, so many Zooms happening now, it's handy to have a little reminder email. So I definitely recommend going to the website. So yeah, it'll be an hour and 15 minutes. And we have Siobhan de Prayer, who many of you may know. She is an amazing Gaeilgeoir poet, an Irish ambassador, an environmental and social justice campaigner. And she's going to be sharing some imbas, which is she's sharing a poem, so I don't know exactly which one yet, but her poems are wonderful, so she'll be joining us. John Crossan will join us too, so he's connected with the Tree Walk. Many people may know him. He's been going around Ireland for about 24 years now, planting trees with children and communities across the island, and introducing them to the richness of trees and the history and songs. So then we also have Kathleen O'Hara Farron, and she is an arts and culture facilitator. So she'll be sharing about well-being and emerging wholeness. Then we have Dara Malloy, who I know you had on last week, and Dara will be sharing about diversity. So he is going to talk about our attitude towards that. Then we have Kathleen Brigidina, who is part of an amazing organisation called Tree Sisters, who have recently planted 12 million trees. So she was in touch with us and expressed an interest in sharing about liberating our creative voice for the earth. And we also have Aisling Fitzgibbon, who is a holistic nutrition coach. So she'll be sharing about the need for a radical departure from the old paradigm of germ theory. So that sounds quite fascinating. And Veronica Larson, she'll be sharing on the laws of nature and the sovereign human. And then we'll have your beautiful self on as well. And I feel like maybe you'd like to share what you're going to share about, rather than me telling, speaking about you in front of you.
Well, without being a smart alecky, all I can say at this stage is only God knows. I'll be just sharing my own experience and hopes for the future, and how we can get there. So it's very, very exciting, and it has just been so incredibly uplifting chatting to you. Beautiful spirit, beautiful energy, and just so visionary. So thank you so much, Michelle. And we'll be coming back to you now in a minute or two.
Okay, thank you, Anna, and thanks to everyone who's tuning in.
And I know now that Enda has shared a private message with me on screen telling me, Anna, charge up your battery. Well, the sad thing is that my battery is on the charger at the moment. So I'm literally on a wing and a prayer. I just hope that the phone will hold out until the end. Please God, it does. So if I suddenly go off air, you'll know that I haven't been silenced by the government, or it'll be just a case of the battery finally giving out on my phone. But as I say, it's plugged into the charger, but obviously the pull on the phone is greater than the amount of charge that's going into it. So now to the second half of our programme, and as always, waiting quietly and silently in the wing, but really, really thinking and putting everything together is Dr. Peter. Dr. Peter Dunn. And I know last week, Peter, my apologies, when I look back at last week's programme, I introduced you and I gave you the wrong name, so I do apologise.
That's quite all right, Anna. I could tell another story. I'm known in a certain other institution as Dr. Peter Cosgrove. So it has happened before, and I thought, you know, that might come in handy someday as a convenient nom de plume. So, you know, I've been called worse things. That's okay. Again, as always, Anna, a really rich vein of conversation there, and so much to take out from that. You know, from Michelle, both Michelle and Enda, and indeed yourself. Something you just said yourself, and again, I said this last week, I just feel a deep responsibility to actually listen to yourself and what our guests have said, and maybe just to try and, you know, draw it all together. You were saying about our, you know, whether we look at our banking system, the health system, the education system, they all seem to be failing. And I just wonder, you know, to what extent is that by design when we think of the hashtag Build Back Better that Professor Klaus Schwab of the World Economic Forum would have us believe. The first thing I think Enda said that I felt really resonated with myself, my own experience, was in terms of the education system and the need for people to, you know, simply to regurgitate instead of actually, you know, the education system producing, you know, critical thinkers who are able to synthesize and able to join dots. And if people are familiar with Bloom's taxonomy, I mean, synthesis is actually, you know, it's the highest form of learning. Interesting if some of our viewers, if they've heard, some may have heard of Pasi Sahlberg and the you know, the innovations that he brought to the Finnish education system. So that's maybe a nice pointer for some of our viewers. People may want to investigate as well in terms of some of the reforms necessary for a banking system, which Seamus May, and I think Seamus has appeared on the Irish Inquiry. Some of Seamus's work is very progressive in that regard. Also, you know, Enda made a point about, you know, just the pace of life and the time poverty that many of us experience, and, you know, the fact that many of our elderly are in care homes. And I think, you know, that certainly was brought into sharp focus last March and April with tragic outcomes, which, you know, obviously is something we can touch on at another time. I think what we're seeing at the moment, we're going through an intense period of change. I think community will be more important. I think scale is a crucial factor. And actually, I'm just about to read or start reading a book, and it's called Small is Beautiful by Schumacher. And again, it's this notion of, I suppose, really contrary to what we're seeing now as the received wisdom in terms of what we might call the globalist era, in terms of all of those tenets of industrial civilization, of, you know, consolidation, centralization, specialization. It tends to look at a more distributive, at a smaller scale system, at community. And I actually think community gardens and, for example, initiatives like community newsletters are going to be more important going forward. This is all about psychology. Psychology is key in what we're going through, and I think actually prayer and reflection are going to be crucial in the years to come. And we're going to go through an immense period of change. And there's one key factor I think maybe a lot of people haven't realized. This time it's different, if I could use that almost cliched expression. And, you know, emigration, since the foundation of the state, has been a safety valve. And the problem this time, there's nowhere else to go. So, to use a cliche, anyone who's watched Deadliest Catch might be familiar with this. We have to stick and stay and make it pay. So, what I'd like to do then, Anna, is just to maybe, I've written a few notes in terms of a preamble to tonight's hot topic question, and I think it's very relevant to what we're seeing and what we're going through at the moment. And I just wonder, has our parliamentary democracy, or even the notion of it, as well as the practice, been subverted even further during 2020 than it had been previously? And I say that because our Taoiseach, and in fact our entire state bureaucracy, the permanent government as it's called, it seems to defer to international or global bodies on all manner of issues. And in truth, the prerogatives of the Dáil have been eroded by successive governments over the past 2 decades, and given the allegiance by the state and any of its governments to international organizations which seem themselves to have been subverted by the doctrine of globalism. Can our sovereignty and parliamentary democracy be eroded even further? And it seems that it can. So let's just briefly see how. In a parliamentary democracy, one role of parliamentary opposition, perhaps the pivotal role, seems self-evidently to temper, to mitigate, and to constrain any excesses or the potential or likelihood of excesses on the part of the government or state. And another role, aiding and abetting that pivotal role, is to provide an alternative and a counter-narrative to any or all policies and their predisposing narratives promulgated by the state and its governments, or that could be seen to act exclusively in the interests of the state or of powerful forces aligned to the state. So then I found the following today, and it's a quote from a Gerald Schmitz in December 1988, and it's titled "The Opposition in a Parliamentary System," and it reads as follows. It just takes about a minute to go through it. And I quote, "A situation in which the activity of politics is devalued is inimical to parliamentary democracy. Parliament, after all, is fundamentally about debate, rhetoric in the classical Greek sense, and the transacting of the people's business in public. It is also about the right to dissent in a civilized manner. Genuine political opposition is a necessary attribute of democracy, tolerance, and trust in the ability of citizens to resolve differences by peaceful means. The existence of an opposition without which politics ceases and administration takes over is indispensable to the functioning of parliamentary political systems. If these systems are perceived as not working well, as being seriously overloaded, to quote a distinguished Canadian opposition leader, the Honourable Robert Stanfield, it may be the rights of political oppositions which are immediately and most visibly at stake, but ultimately the threat is to democratic rights and freedoms generally." So I noticed that the Dáil was actually debating zero COVID today, implying or aligning with even harsher measures than are currently in force. And all opposition parties now support it. So we're actually in a situation where the alternative to completely destroying the country, except for the state bureaucracy perhaps and multinational corporations, is somehow something even more ludicrous. So then, in light of all that, this week's hot topic question is, do you think, or do our panelists agree, that the opposition is able to hold the government to account?
Okay, Peter, I just want to thank you for that. Yeah, there's an awful lot to unpack in what you have just said. I know that what you've just spoken about is something that actually is the makings of an entire program. You know, it's something that would need to be teased out, you know, over an hour-long conversation. And I want to thank you for that. And maybe it's something that we will return to in more detail. But yeah, so if I could begin with you, Enda, do you think that the opposition in Ireland, in the Dáil, is holding the government to account effectively?
Well, thank you for that, Peter, and a lot of a lot of food for thought there. I suppose I'm going to, instead of speaking generally, I'm going to be very specific. You know, the main party in opposition is Sinn Féin, and Mary Lou's brother and a sister. Her sister Joanne is.
No, Enda. I'm sorry, I have to cut across you here. Just from the point of view of libel and defamation, we cannot mention names.
Okay.
And I do apologise for that. Okay. So maybe if you just speak in general terms.
Okay, I'll speak in general forms. I think if a party, if the opposition is demonstrating itself as being compromised, and then it's very concerning. It's almost like, dare I say, controlled opposition. And I'm very concerned about controlled opposition within the opposition in the government in Ardal. So this is the main point I really want to say, is that this is why, rather than looking at can they hold the government to account, maybe asking why they're not holding the government to account, going to the source of their connections, and this needs to be unpacked and asked.
Okay.
I apologise again for using names. I didn't know the protocol there.
No, you didn't. No. You're okay, and there's no need to apologise. It's just that the libel and defamation laws in Ireland are very, very, very strict. So, and that's my job. My role then is to make sure that nobody is libelled or defamed. So, in what you have just said there, you have spoken in general terms about the opposition parties, plural. That it's important that we go and look and see, are they in any way compromised? And I suppose it goes back to what Michelle was saying, that the pillars on which sovereignty is built, which is transparency and accountability. And I suppose what I was hearing there is that you know, there's a lack of accountability and a lack of transparency. Am I right in saying that?
Yes, that's what I feel. Yes, and observe. So when you go and you go down and see the connections, and that's the concerning aspect to this. It's why this solution is to go into more lockdowns, when most independent scientists who are worth their salt and who understand immunity, they know that locking people up is worse for their immunity. That why is the government, a true government would really, for starters, rather than banning people being able to buy children's clothes, why do they not ban junk food? And so that we can all eat healthy food, and why not throw in, say, aerobics for elderly people after the news at 6 o'clock? And there's so many things the government could do for health, and it's not in line with looking after the people, and that's really sad, that our government is not truly looking after its people and supporting the health of people. It's like the analogy of, you have a fish bowl with a little goldfish in it, and the water's dirty in the fish bowl. Now, do you take the fish out and put it in clean water, in a bowl with clean water, or do you vaccinate the fish in the dirty bowl? It doesn't make sense. We need to be looking at immunity. We need to be looking at the source of health.
Yes, and yeah, that is a very good point. That and it's something that you mentioned already at the top of the programme, that the whole emphasis is on disease and profiting from disease rather than prevention and promoting good health, and that there's so much that we can do to prevent ourselves from getting ill.
Is that a question to me?
Oh yeah, it was just okay. So that was, I suppose, it was just a statement, I suppose, that I made in response. And I suppose the whole reason for the lockdown is in response to health. It's in response to dealing with a disease. You know, perhaps the medicine of lockdown is actually worse than the disease itself. So, and thank you for that. And we will come back to you. Michelle, what are your thoughts on what we've been just talking about?
Thank you, Anna. Yeah, I feel like I don't really know so much about what's been discussed in the Dáil to make a very fair response to that, you know, inquiry in some ways. But I feel like from my perspective and from one who does vote and who feels like that's an important part of being a citizen of Ireland and being part of this journey, this country, what I feel is that yeah, I don't think that I ever really came across anyone within that realm, and maybe I've yet to meet them. So I pray that that's true, but that I felt a trust in, you know, that I felt that those qualities that I mentioned earlier are actually somewhat being implemented, you know. And I do think, having said that, that anyone who steps into the political realm and has a vision for changing something, it's a very courageous. And as I remember hearing the president, he spoke recently to honour Brigid's Day, and he mentioned Mishnach, you know, the courage that we have as a nation. So I do think anyone who steps into that role is very courageous. But I just feel that right now, with the way the system is, it at least from my window, it appears to be quite divisive, and it doesn't feel like it's moving from a place of heart. It just feels very power driven, I suppose. And so, yeah, I know what I know about it, which is quite little. And so therefore, I don't want to, speak into too much about it. I tend to put my energies into music and other things that I feel I can actually, I suppose, contribute to from the heart. And so therefore, I don't have too much to say, but thank you for inviting me to respond.
Michelle, actually, as I'm listening to you, I think that so many people in Ireland, you have just articulated how they feel about it, that so many people have, as it were, switched off and disengaged because they're just not happy about what is actually happening in the whole political arena. And I suppose that's reflected. You have said you voted, but the number of people that are actually engaging with the political process and exercising the right to vote is falling all the time. So, you know, people are, I suppose, just disconnecting and disengaging. If I could go back to Peter, do you have any more questions, I suppose, to wind up our discussion? Your microphone is muted, Peter.
My apologies, Anna.
Not at all.
I've done that again. I suppose, a few points, Anna, just maybe to tie everything together and close things out. In relation to what I was saying, you know, parliamentary opposition, it's really struck me how the opposition parties, all of the opposition parties, are calling for actually stricter, harsher measures than the government. Harsh as they are, the opposition, you know, want to eliminate COVID completely. They want to eradicate COVID. I mean, and they're all, you know, singing off the same hymn sheet in unison. So, I mean, what do they actually want to do? I mean, that this has absolutely no basis in science. The only two diseases which have been declared eradicated in recorded history, at least, are smallpox and which, you know, was in the area of human health, and then in veterinary health, rinderpest. These are the only two diseases declared eradicated. And then, you know, you make that point to some of the zero COVID, I call them zealots, and they say, well, we don't want to we don't want zero. It doesn't have to be zero, but we just want to sort of flatten it to an acceptable level. So, it's not based in any science at all. Curiously, I'm old enough to remember, Alan Dukes when he was Fine Gael leader, and they had the Tallaght strategy when Charles Haughey was leader of Fianna Fáil and Taoiseach, and Dukes kind of had this notion that it was maybe not the wisest course of action to oppose purely for the sake of opposition, that if Haughey had a good policy or a good proposal, that they would row in behind it. And that was criticised in terms of the kind of Westminster model for many, many years. But now, I mean, it's been completely inverted, where the opposition, rather than being what they're supposed to be, which is a kind of a mitigating force, they're supposed to dampen down the excesses of government. They're actually they're cheerleading them on to those very excesses that they're supposed to actually to rail against. So, they've actually, this whole shambles has actually defused the entire mechanistic basis of parliamentary democracy, if you think about it. I think one of the key demographic, Anna, in all of this, maybe we can speculate that perhaps 20% of people saw this probably by the end of April last year, maybe into May. I think maybe 20% of people had kind of woken up to a very large extent and said this is not what it appears to be. I think there's a huge middle ground. There's a middle block, and I think we could call those the Gagas. Not that they've gone Gaga, but we can call them the Gagas, the go along, the get along cohort, if you will, that massive cohort. And I think a substantial majority of those, perhaps up to half of that middle block, maybe of 60% of the population, have actually woken up and have said, look, this is nonsense. This is a vast overshoot on the part of the government, and we can speculate as to why they're actually going along with it, so to speak. And really, that's it, I suppose, in terms of my own contribution. Just to say that our guests have been fantastic, and hopefully we've contributed to the start of some kind of debate. Could I just a little thought experiment, if I could maybe say this, Anna, because we know that the mainstream news broadcasts have bombarded us. Now people have the choice to switch channels or switch the TV off, but we've been bombarded day after day after day, relentlessly for a year, with either death statistics or case numbers, just to get case numbers, to bump up numbers, essentially to frighten people. And a thought experiment: can you imagine if this had never happened? None of this had ever happened. Imagine there was an initiative on the part of, coordinated between An Garda Síochána and RTE, or maybe Virgin Media, for example, that every day for a year they would tell us, they would broadcast how many burglaries had occurred in the country. And one could even say it's analogous almost to a viral epidemic, where you would have a winter resurgence, or you would have a winter peak, those dark winter evenings, and the burglars are stalking the land. Obviously you'd have elderly people in fear of their safety if day after day, month after month, every burglary in the land, and possibly they could even be more granular, and they could report attacks on women, they could report all sorts of crimes, and you can see, or one can see now, where a state of sort of in the public consciousness, a state of paranoia could become very, very prominent. And if I could just, in a bit like a novel, you could imagine where a multinational electronics firm might benefit from the sale of burglar alarms or something. So it's a little bit analogous to what we're seeing now.
It's a very interesting thought,
it's
Peter.
Just a thought experiment, Anna.
Yeah. So I suppose it has been a program in two halves. On the one hand, you have been pointing out, as it were, where the system is failing, the political system is failing, and on the other hand, we have Enda and Michelle proposing solutions. proposing, or I suppose, giving us a vision of where the country could go along a path towards healing and prosperity. So, a final word from you, Enda.
The final word is that there's amazing things happening. There's, as we said already, there's shifts in our communities. More people are becoming better informed. More people are asking questions. There's a huge blessing coming out of COVID that is stirring up solutions and bringing people together. And I think that it's very optimistic for the future. You know, we do see the stuff like what's, you know, the World Economic Forum, and people are watching that and they're going, actually, no, not in my name. I'm not going to subscribe to that. And, you know, this push for 80% vaccines by September, this is going to stir up everybody towards, you know, autonomy over their bodies. And this is going to be a huge awakening. And I see amazing things happening as a result of this. And people standing into their sovereignty and also thinking of their children and future generations, as Michelle was saying, and us looking after our elderly again. This has highlighted the neglect. I know it's terrible, the old people that have died, but this has highlighted the fact that we need to get them out of homes. And I'll just say that when my dad is from Lisdoonvarna, and when he was a kid in Lisdoonvarna in rural Ireland, he said there wasn't a home in the country that didn't have an old person in the corner rocking away. And if you were in a home in Ennis, then there was definitely something wrong. Something definitely went wrong. And this has got to change, and it is going to change. And I, for one, will not let my dad go into one of those places, and I'll do what I have to do to look after him in his last years. And I think more and more people will, to start with, and that's just looking after those who need us. So it's amazing. It's great. There's great changes happening.
Right. I just wonderful, wonderful positivity. You know, living out the change that we're looking for and being the change that we're looking for. And the final word goes to you, Michelle.
Thank you, Anna. Yeah, so what I'm feeling to say is I would love that whoever is listening to, if you feel to just take maybe a moment after this, or whenever you may hear this, to tune into your Aisling, to your vision and to your dream, your Bringloid, and just journey with it in whatever way feels good. You know, you could write some things down, and, you know, we as a movement, Sovereignty Ireland, are really open and welcoming of everyone sharing their visions, and in whatever way. You don't necessarily need to become a member. You can share your vision, and that can be incorporated into what we're co-creating for the vision for Ireland. But beyond, you know, this movement, really to tune in with what kind of way do you want to be, and what way would you like to live, and what future would you like your children to, or, you know, the children, if you don't have children, how would you like them to be living? And we can really co-create something very beautiful together on this earth. And, you know, yeah, just to tune into, like the Native Americans do, they consider the next 7 generations and beyond. And we really have right now, with where we find ourselves, this, like, well, most of us, maybe not all of us, of course, but we have this spaciousness, and there's almost like a pause in many people's lives, where there would have been a lot of perhaps busyness before. So yeah, I really invite everyone to tune into that, and to maybe optimize or use that time to really tune into what your vision is, and to sit with that in some way, reflect. And if you feel the call to share it with us, and to go onto our website and express what you would love to share and what you would love to see in this land of Éire, Ireland. So yeah, thank you. And thank you, Anna, for your warm invitation, and thank you, Peter, for all your contributions. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Peter.
And thank you, Michelle, and thanks to Peter and to Enda. and to you who have been listening in. I hope you enjoyed our conversation tonight. We are in uncharted waters, and we don't know where we're heading. And I suppose it's a very crowded marketplace with many people crowding in, offering solutions. Now, I'm a retired history teacher, and I like to be able to stand back over the course of history and to see the bigger picture. And quite often what has happened in times of great turmoil and change like that we're going through now, people that are, I suppose, tuned into what is happening can actually use the situation to propel themselves into a position of power, and they're not necessarily the right people to be in charge or to hold the reins of power. So what I would invite you to do is to pause, as Michelle said, to pause and reflect and look at who you are listening to. Who are the people that you are listening to? What are they offering? What's their vision? What methods do they intend using to bring about that vision? And if nothing else comes out of tonight's program, except you just taking time out to reflect on who it is that you're listening to, and to really consider where it is those people want to take you. Now, for the last couple of weeks, I have been engaged in dialogue, first of all with Enda and with Michelle, and I have to say that I'm very impressed with with their manifesto and what they're offering. So on that note, I want to thank you. If you feel that this program is worthwhile, please share it. And I look forward to your company next Wednesday night at the usual time, 9 o'clock. Have a wonderful week. Bannock today or Galéir.